Welcome to the Hollywood Outsider, an award-winning weekly entertainment podcast. On this episode, we are discussing the accident that has caught Hollywood off guard, the film adaptation of Frank Herbert's sci-fi epic Dune, and how we really feel about movies that end on a cliffhanger. Let's get on with the show. My name is Aaron Peterson. Joining me today is my fellow host, Troy Heinrichs.
Good morning, evening, and anywhere else around the world today.
It's morning. We actually were not going to do a podcast this week at all. We were actually going to take the week off, and that's why you don't hear Amanda Sink or John Davenport, because they chose to still do that. But we wanted to talk about Dune, and of course this on-set incident with Rust, which is just crazy.
You could say like life is a little spicy potentially to this week.
No, all the spice jokes are, I wonder. I wish the Spice Girls would have had a cameo at some point, just in the background or something.
You're exactly right.
What do you want? What do you really, really want? Spice. Oh, here we are. I don't know. That's just stupid. But it would be fun. I would get a lot more enjoyment than I might have gotten currently. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. I'm actually kind of curious. I haven't heard yet what Troy thinks of this film, and I'm kind of interested to see what he thinks. We'll discuss it spoiler-free-ish. I don't really think you can spoil this movie since there's
nothing happened.
Yeah, there's a portion of that. Yeah, there's a portion of that. I mean, it's kind of a lot of setup for the second movie. We'll get there. One thing I did want to mention, though, a friend tipped me off to a study that was kind of done recently by somebody who has a lot of free time, where they looked at the amount of remakes and sequels and whatnot that are being churned out by Hollywood since the 70s. And from the 70s through like 1999, it was pretty much status quo. I mean, same number throughout the years. And then after 1999 till now, it's just like, boom, spiked up like Corona down south. So what do you attribute that to? Do you think it's because of television? Do you think it's because quality television came more into the forefront in terms of after 1999, 2000 and later?
I think there's probably two things that happen. One is, like you were saying, television became a much more interesting medium for big screen actors. And you saw a shift of big screen actors moving to the small screen and having the long form content concept. I think you also ran into probably some copyright law issues where, things would become part of public domain if there wasn't a franchise or some other content produced about that particular material. So studios got into this concept of how do we lock stuff up as long as we possibly can by creating these brand properties. Like when the internet started happening too, in the early 90s, it was all about like, what's your brand, what's your place on the internet, things of that nature. So there's probably a combination of that. And then I also think that we got to the point where some of us just got a little bit older. So people had grown up with movies and television in the 70s and 80s. And as they start moving into the early 90s, early aughts, we're seeing some of the 70s and 80s type movies get remade. And then now as we move into the teens, and into the 20s now, we're seeing some of those like late 80s, early 90s movies getting remade because it's nostalgia for us that we could then show our children. So it's literally trying to get this sticky lock-in perspective so that they can keep making money off of people that are like, oh, this is familiar, but yet also new for a new generation. And I'm sure it'll repeat the cycle again in 30 years.
The nostalgia bucks. Nostalgia dollars. And I will say, I mean, we're talking about the TV element. A lot of what you would consider mainstream dramas, mainstream thrillers, that sort of thing, those are being made for television now. They're not being churned out in the theaters because people weren't paying as much to see them. That's really ultimately what it boiled down to. I feel like a lot of studios are greenlighting properties that have that name recognition value because that'll get butts in seats. They don't have to wonder, is this going to catch on? Unless you've got an elite director behind it, like a Christopher Nolan or Spielberg or something, there's no guarantee that somebody's going to show up. And movie stars aren't really as much of a thing these days as they used to be.
Yeah, you might have a powerhouse like a Zendaya, for example, and you see Zendaya and you pop her in the trailer for Dune all over the place, and then you realize that she doesn't even do anything in the movie.
Here's the bitterness. She's a dream. She's a lot of dreams. Yeah, Paul just really thinks about her a lot. So it's like watching some guy go through a teenage fantasy. We're not at Dune yet. We're still talking about other stuff.
But that's the whole point. Like they're trying to like Dune is something that's probably not going to appeal to the masses. So the movie people put the thing that's going to appeal to the masses in the trailers to get you to come in, because they know that this is the only way they're going to get people to come in to see this thing.
Yeah, she's a very popular actress. I mean, Oscar Isaac's a great actor. I don't know if he's a big draw,
right?
Fiscally. Josh Brolin, same thing. Great actor. Don't know how much of a draw he is fiscally. So Timothée Chalamet, not necessarily a big draw either. Did you know his name is actually pronounced Timothée?
Timothée?
Because he's French. Yeah, French.
Yeah.
But he actually doesn't mind when people call him Timothy.
And and this is probably why things are being made for TV, because it's also the convenience of it. So I really wanted to get to Dune in the theater, and I just had a really busy weekend. And the fact that it was on HBO Max last night is the only reason I'm able to sit here, because I was able to watch it on HBO Max on my time when I was able to fit it in. So I think moving to television as well is just giving people the ability to have choice. And if you can then bring in something that's a known property, like The Wonder Years currently being remade, but in a different way on ABC currently, I think it's just something that, people used to sit together as families around the TV on Must See Thursday and all this other stuff. And I think that's why they're trying to move it to television, is because you either have the binge format on Netflix, or you have the week-to-week kind of format happening on Hulu and Disney Plus, where the family can get together and have that family time again.
It's hard to compete. Theaters have a hard time competing anymore when you have so much content on television, where people don't have to leave their house for so much content. Like, I can watch something new every time I sit down to watch something and not have to worry about, I sure hope I have something new to watch tomorrow. Like, there's no problem finding something to watch new, which never used to be the problem. Now it's the problem. So to stand out, they have to have that name, that brand recognition. That's just a thing.
Yeah, I got stuff I want to watch that I can't even get to. I mean, I still have not started Foundation on Apple TV Plus. I still haven't started Invasion, which I think just dropped recently. I haven't started The Morning Show. I haven't started Lock and Key Season 2. And I'm still trying to keep up on my day-to-day shows like Grey's Anatomy and The Resident and Goldbergs and all that. Like, it's just a lot.
You can give up those last three and probably watch the other stuff you want to watch. Just so you know. I mean, I think you'll be fine. What's really going to happen in Grey's that's going to change the world?
Grey's is what I use though on Saturday morning when I want to go back to sleep because I woke up at 5. So I just put it on and then I fall back asleep.
It sounds like a rousing endorsement for Grey's Anatomy. Season 24, whatever the hell they're on. 17?
24,000.
God, so much TV. All right. Well, let's go to our news roundup, and then we're going to get to Dune and, of course, discuss Cliffhangers a little bit. The biggest piece of news is this tragedy that happened on the indie movie Rust, where cinematographer Halyna Hutchins was killed and director Joel Souza was injured when a prop gun was handed to actor Alec Baldwin, and he was told it was a cold gun, which meant safe gun, by assistant director Dave Halls. He then fired the gun, and it apparently contained live rounds. Now, a lot of things are still coming out about this. You're going to hear more facts every single day until they put this together. But just a little bit of background. Dave Halls had worked on Blumhouse films a couple years earlier, had complaints against him for aggressive behavior. Some of the crew are saying in reports that there were some complaints about an unsafe set. In retrospect, I don't know how much of that is completely accurate, but it's through AP reporting, so I'm going to assume they've done their due diligence. Russ Armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, she's only 24. She recently told a podcast she almost didn't take the job because she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. It's probably not going to look great for her on reflection, I'm sure. But on the same token, I mean, there's supposed to be security measures in place. I don't want this to be a blame game, who's at fault, because unfortunately that's what the internet becomes. You know, it's a tragedy. I don't know if fault matters so much as why weren't steps followed to ensure something like this never, ever happened again. I mean, Brandon Lee's obviously the most popular reflection when people talk about this. Like, that's the one everyone knows about, how Brandon Lee was accidentally killed, but but through the hands of Michael Massey because of issue with the discharge of a firearm. So what do you think about this? You know, you have a long-standing love of film and television. You know how you have a degree in film and television, so you know how the background of this works, and a lot of the safety measures that have changed. You know, this shouldn't happen. There are some safeguards that are supposed to ensure that this doesn't happen. They check to make sure there's no live rounds. When they say cold gun, that means the actor shouldn't have to wonder if there's a live round in it. There's supposed to be a dummy point or a dummy line, depending on who you're talking to. It's referenced, which means a line of sight so that the cinematographer, director of photography, same thing, is behind the camera, director's behind the camera. Wherever the actor's pointing that gun, there's supposed to be nobody in that line of sight. I mean, there's small things that are supposed to be done to ensure that this never happens again. And here we are with this poor woman dead and this director grossly injured. So what do you think about this whole situation other than?
Yeah. I mean, this just comes down to pure human ignorance. I think at this point of everything that we've read, all the stories that have come out, there's so much basic stuff that you can do to prevent this from happening. If you've ever been on a set or TV stage, even in the theater, where you have, obviously the audience out front, and then you have, the wings, and then the backdrop. We always talk about blocking, and we talk about line of sight. And when you see things happen on camera, like when we were on the set of The Blacklist, for example, and we saw how they film people sitting inside of a car, and it's literally half of a car. It's not a whole car; it's a half of a car. And they literally like bounce around in their seat, getting jostled around when they're getting like turbulence or running over a bump or something. It looks friggin' ridiculous. And so when you think about how you shoot with a camera, a particular sequence, there should be nobody standing behind the camera, because you set the camera up and then you just let the camera roll and you can watch it on a monitor from a safe distance. Number one. Number two, there should be nothing behind the camera beyond that. It should literally be like on a gun range, unless you were like completely sway left or right with the pistol, then there's no way you're going to hit anything, because you should be aiming, like you said, down range at a complete clear line of sight. And so how this bullet even hit people to begin with, just from that setup of the staging and the blocking of the shot, that's a problem. Then the gun itself, there was talk about how, they were being used offset and be able to shoot after with live rounds and things of that nature. So yeah, that part, that's probably on the armorer in this case, Gutierrez, right? Yeah. Was it just that stuff wasn't locked up properly? Was it because they were using non-union labor, because it was the union people that walked off the set because of the conditions? There's just so much here that's just all avoidable with better leadership, better training, better understanding. And I think really when it comes down to it, in this day and age, when people are literally printing 3D models out of resin and plastic to make their favorite statue, video game characters, all this other stuff, why are we using real guns in the first place? We can 3D print a gun and do enough with computer visual effects at this point that you can make it look good enough that it would be able to be sold, because you're shooting it. Unless you're like shooting it up close where the camera's literally on the chamber of the gun, maybe like in Dark Tower, for example, where the gun is actually a character in itself in a way. Like there's no reason to even have live round. There's no reason to have live rounds on the set, period. Two,
absolutely not.
There's no reason to have a gun in the first place. Just 3D print it. We played cops and robbers growing up as kids with plastic guns, and we seem to all fantasize and do the things we needed to do to play make-believe just fine without real weapons. I think this is a time where Hollywood needs to really take a step back and look at that and go, do we actually need live, real things, or can we do actual plastic props?
Yeah, and I think it was a Rookie recently. They already banned live guns on set, which honestly, why? And I get that it's an independent production, so therefore there are budget limitations. So obviously they can't do CGI guns, right? That's a costly effect that isn't so easy to do. But there are other options, and they're like you said, there's zero reason a live round should be anywhere near a gun that's going to be in an actor's hands at any point. You should never be using that for target. If that report proves to be true, I don't want to proclaim that it is, but I mean, I've seen it multiple times, so it's possible. That gun should never be used for anything but the film itself. So there should be nothing live in that prop, nothing. And I understand that sometimes they have this because they want that reality effect. They want it to look real. I mean, they're trying to make an edgy Western, I'm sure. And I'm sure that it's probably one of those shots, because it's the only way I can picture a cinematographer being behind the camera when to where they would be impacted by a live round. You know what I mean? Is if they were doing an actor pointing the gun directly at the camera for one of those shots. On the same token, like you said, even an independent production, there's no reason for that cinematographer to be right there. Like, there's no reason anyone should be in that line of sight where the weapon is. None. It's a tragedy, and I'm sure it's a snowball of mistakes kind of thing. You know, poor Alec Baldwin, he's doubled on this one. I mean, he's the actor, and you know, nobody's holding him at fault because he would have to know it was a live round in there, and I can't imagine for the life of me that he had any notion that was a live round. He's also a producer, so he's going to have liability on this thing. I mean, there's a whole lot that goes into this, and it's just the safety that goes into a set should always be maintained. And I can't, like, seriously, man, you know, we had John Hill on here many, many years ago. He's a director who did a film, and he did a film with Michael Massey, and we had a long conversation about Michael Massey and, you know, kind of off air, which, you know, I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, but it's just when you're talking about something as serious as, you know, accidentally taking a human life, that person's going to have to live with that for the rest of their lives, even if they're not at fault. You know, even though Alec Baldwin is not at fault, like, he didn't know that there's a live round, he's going to have to live with that for the rest of his life. Could affect the rest of his life. Michael Massey, I mean, had a hard time continuing with his own life, let alone his acting career. It was detrimental to his mental state because, you know, how do you recover from something like that? You know, you didn't mean to do it. It's not like when someone intentionally hurts someone, you know, where you're like, I can walk away from that because I'm a horrible person. No, this is a good person as far as I know, you know, and that makes a mistake, or someone else made the mistake and you had no idea. I don't know. It's just a tragedy all the way across the board. Shouldn't happen. 100% should never happen. So you think ban weapons altogether on the sets? Just get them out of there. They don't need to be there. Nothing live. Nothing that can actually... Because I agree with that. I don't see why they're still doing it. I don't see why that's even a possibility.
Because you can do all the protocols in the world. And I think part of the problem of this is that you're always supposed to have a 2-person check whenever you do the guns. So like when they're going through their prep and walkthrough and whatever for the set, there should be, you know, 2 people, and you're discharging the guns and you're making sure they're completely empty, and you have a second person validating that, yes, it's empty.
The armor, the AD, those are supposed to be the safety checks. And I would honestly say there should probably be 3 checks personally, but sure.
Especially with something like a live round, for sure.
Well, a live gun, because there shouldn't be a live round. There shouldn't even be a concern that there's a live round near this gun, really. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, and I mean, I get the realism of it. I get the, you know, budget constraints on it and things of that nature. But it's like, isn't there a way, like, take the unions, for example, or the guilds or somebody, like the Screen Actors Guild, could literally fund a 3D printing workshop where you could then like have these plastic fake that look real guns, and then these places could like rent them for free or very low cost to use for these small budget productions, rather than having to like try to create everything yourself. Like, there's got to be a way that a place would be able to do that. You know, maybe coming out of a creative fund, you know, out of this, obviously you want the GoFundMe for the family and, you know, expenses and things of that nature for a funeral and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But like, why can't like all of $1 of every ticket proceeds for the next year go to a fund that would then make, you know, safe guns that look real that people could then just have for their productions, you know, at no charge, just so that we can make sure that people are safe.
Yeah. And why does it need to come out of our ticket dollar? I mean, basically, you've got unions that are paid dues and fees. Establish that. I mean, I don't see any reason why they couldn't establish that. And honestly, actors, extremely highly paid actors, it's like a lot of them are, should be having that fund themselves. I mean, it keeps them safe. You know what I mean? And it protects those under them. So why wouldn't you come up with something that would ensure that these guns can look as real? They don't have to be pitch perfect replicas of existing weapons. They just don't. I realize that some people will be sticklers about that. Most people don't pay attention to those kinds of details. They're just like, bang, bang. Oh, got the guy. You know, that's what most people are watching film and television for. They're not breaking down every aspect of a weapon. They're just right. Not. Unless it's pivotal to the point, like it's a movie about a weapon. I don't think that anyone's going to care if there's some shortcuts to the design taking place. Just do whatever it takes to keep people safe, man. That's what they need to do.
It's just sad.
It's very sad. Our thoughts go out to their families, for sure. And other news, Netflix had their walkout because it's Netflix employees versus Dave Chappelle, apparently, on some front, where over 100 protesters participated. And they had a list of demands. And this is basically because they consider Dave Chappelle transphobic over his Netflix special. You and I both watched it. I did not see or hear the same things or concerns that other people, sounds like, did. What I think doesn't really matter. This is their concern. So they had a protest and they had a list of demands. And I'm just going to read off what those demands are. They're saying that the closer, Dave Chappelle's special, has caused harm to the trans community, and therefore more investment in trans content on the platform needs to happen. So they had a full list of demands that they wanted from Netflix. And I mean, it's a lot of demands. I mean, I'm just going to go through them. So eliminate references, imagery of Chappelle inside the workplace, including but not limited to murals, posters, room name, swag. So basically get rid of Chappelle, even though it's the biggest stand-up comedian that Netflix has.
And he's done how many specials total now? Because he had a contract for 6, if I remember
I think
correctly.
He did 6. I think he's done 6. Yeah.
Okay.
Acknowledgement that the special causes harm to the trans community and Netflix's responsibility on it. So we keep the conversation around transphobia evolving internally. Trans and non-binary content investment. So invest in that property. Investment in trans or non-binary content on Netflix comparable to our total investment in transphobic content, including comparable investment in the promotion of content. Now, that would make the case that they would have to acknowledge that it was transphobic. I mean, who defines what is transphobic and what isn't? I don't think just a community can define that. I think it should be across the board if it's transphobic. I mean, I think many of us are good people who don't want hateful things out there. It should be pretty easy to establish what's transphobic and what's not, I would think. The comparable class of investments should include, but not limited to, works produced by Dave Chappelle, Ricky Gervais's Afterlife, etc. So apparently Ricky Gervais is transphobic. I never watched that show, so I don't know specifically what they're talking about. Investment in multiple trans creators to make both scripted and unscripted programs across genres. There's a lot of stuff. Revisit internal processes on commissioning and or releasing potential harmful content involving numerous and diverse parties that can speak on its harm, including consultation on third-party vendors. Revisit the ERG role in conversations around potential harmful content and develop materials to ensure we have the best in-class regional support on complicated diversity issues. Hire transgender content executives in leading positions and promote an inclusive environment for them. Recruit trans people for leadership roles in the company and promote an inclusive environment for them. The ability for trans employees and allies to be able to remove themselves from company promotional content. A disclaimer before the closer specifically saying it contains transphobic language, misogyny, homophobia, and hate speech. Boost promotion for disclosure and other trans-affirming details in the platform. And I will tell you, from all of that, we're talking about a comedy special. Whether you find it funny or not, it is a comedy special. It's Dave Chappelle, the closer. All of that, the only thing that I think should be warranted is a disclaimer, not like they say, because by saying it contains transphobic language, misogyny, homophobia, and hate speech, is that a fact or is that an opinion?
I mean, I guess it depends on how you took the content, right? I also thought he was using the content in a way to also give credit to the community at the same time, if I remember correctly, because he was talking about how he was
how he had
hired a person on his team and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's hard. Right. Everything is a person or community or a group's opinion about how they interpret things. And everybody has a right to their opinion and the right how they view the world. Granted, some views are probably a little bit more, gross will be the word I can come up with right now this early in the morning than others. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But
absolutely.
I mean, I stand for trans people. I'm an ally. I understand and I get it. And I know what they're trying to accomplish. And I think that, yeah, at some point, should we? I think the things we should do is we should do a better job of having a larger screening audience that comes from all walks of life to be able to say, is this offensive or is this not offensive? And even in then, you're going to have some people who are I'm white. This picks on. I'm talking from my perspective, right? Because I'm not trans. I have friends that are trans, but I can't speak to it because I don't live it. So I'm just going to say it from this perspective, and then you can apply it across whatever group you want to apply it across. But I'm white, and this thing picks on white people. This people picks on white men specifically. And I'm just okay, I know it's picking on white men, but it's kind of funny. And another white man, Aaron, could look at it and go, oh my gosh, this is the crappiest shit I've ever seen in my life. And therefore I can't watch this network ever again. And that's the same people that are in the same group being attacked, also having differing opinion. So I think all of it is hard. All of it is challenging. All of it needs reexamination. At the same time, I think content is the art of the creator. And sometimes you're going to have art and creation that doesn't go along with your point of view. And that's okay. That's how we grow. That's how we think. That's how we do things. I think it was an absolute freaking masterpiece that Lovecraft Country on HBO Max came out, and it was an entirely black cast because it literally sticks a middle finger literally in Lovecraft's face because he was the most racist person that ever walked the earth when you think about it and what he wrote. And like, that's the things that we should be doing. We should be saying like, hey, here's the original content. Here's why it's bad. Therefore, here's how we're going to address the situation for modern times. Because modern times, we change, we grow, we evolve, we become better people. Does this special, this one incident make all of this need to happen? It's probably a little bit much, right? But at the same time, I think we can do a better job to be more inclusive in our screening rooms to make sure that the content is good for all people. I think that we should be doing more trans and non-binary content investment so we can make people aware. And we definitely should make sure that there's work for trans and non-binary people to be working in television and film, just like everybody else. I think those are valid things to say. And if Chappelle's special helped cause that to happen, is that not a good thing? Even though the content itself might have been in poor taste.
I mean, there's something to be said for that. Absolutely. Should there be more content? Absolutely. I think there has been an increase in content in the trans community in terms of approaching that genre. The Garden Left Behind, we had the director on here last year before, whatever it was, great movie, confronting the trans experience and kind of going through the specifics of that. I mean, there's a lot more films coming out. There's a lot more television coming out. There's a lot of things coming out in regards to that. So people are becoming more informed. And, in all fairness, for many people, it's a newer concept. It's not, racism has been around for hundreds of years. The trans experience is newer to a lot of people, so they're adjusting to it, and they might not quite understand specifics of it. Now, whatever you thought of Chappelle, I don't think one special determines that a whole network doesn't feel a certain way, because apparently they have trans employees, so they have an inclusive environment to a degree at this point. Like, I don't know how inclusive it is. I don't work there, but on the same token, they had enough to where there was a walkout. I feel like that's something. I know I can tell you I've seen many companies with no trans people that I'm aware of. There are conversations to be had. I just don't want to live in a place where we can't have people saying things that offend people, no matter what it is. And even if it's hate, I'm not sticking up for hateful speech at all. I think it's gross and disgusting, and people should be, I don't think persecuted, but definitely demonized. I mean, I don't want a world where we respect hateful speech. On the same token, if you start telling people what they can or can't say, that leads to the lack of free speech, and I'm not a fan of that. I am not a fan of telling people you can't say that. No, you can say it, and you're just going to have to live with whatever the repercussions are. But I never want to be in a position where you tell someone they can't say something. Get it off your network because it shouldn't be there, period, because it's hateful. Well, sometimes people speaking in polarizing language creates conversation. This is, whatever you feel about the special, the most conversation I've heard about the trans community has happened because of this special. Is that not a good thing? Regardless of the negativity, I mean, isn't that a good thing?
Let's look at it at a different angle. Let's look at Hannah Baker's Suicide on Netflix, also, right?
Sure.
You're literally have a scene graphically depicted in exactly how to do the act and the procedure. And then you have one side of the coin where people are like, oh my gosh, you got to take that out because it literally shows kids that are like how to do this and it glorifies the act. And at the same time, like I'm sitting in a hotel room literally sobbing, with Kate Walsh's character at the same time, because it's like, how could someone actually go through with it? Because this is the first time I've even seen it happen in my lifetime. And I'm like, that's how it happens. Like holy crap, man. Like, that's wow. Right. So art is supposed to create conversation and awareness and thought. And if you censor thought and creation and opinion, you censor humanity and we become just shells. And I don't think that that's what we should be doing. You don't even know that the intent of the special from Chappelle was to truly do this, was to have conversation, bring something to light, and you have to, we talk about in history books, even with kids growing up, like the history books are whitewashed and whatever, and it's written by white men and all these conversations. It's like, yeah, you have to tell both sides of the story in order to get the story. And if you don't talk about it in a way that the hate speech is talking about it, you don't teach people that that's hate speech. Don't do that. Stop. Right? So you have to present both sides. It can't be all Pollyanna all the time.
Absolutely.
But do it in a tasteful way, in a respectful way, and let people know that, hey, the disclaimer up front, yeah, this has some hate speech in it. It's done for the purposes of education, not entertainment. Please take it as such. That's probably the disclaimer that should be up front.
And I do think the winner of all those demands is going to be a disclaimer, right? Like a warning. This conversation in this comedy special, these comments are reflective only of the comedian themselves, and you're on your own to decipher what they mean or what the context is. Something along those lines. I don't know if you label it hate speech though, because like I said, I've seen people on both sides, allies, I've seen trans allies say that they don't find it hateful. So it very much depends on your personal perspective. So I don't know if you call it hate speech, just there's language and conversation in here that might offend you or might be concerning to you or something like that. I mean, I can see that. I think Netflix has probably already said that.
Standard trigger warning.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's get into something exciting, ? Which is Dune. Let's talk about Dune. Okay. This is the new movie which finally adapts Frank Herbert's science fiction novel. And yes, we had it done. There's like a 2000 miniseries that I heard was pretty good. There was the David Lynch movie, which happened in the 80s. And if you saw it, is weird as hell. I got so much more out of this than I got out of that because I'm convinced nothing happened in the original movie with David Lynch. It was just a bunch of weirdness because it's David Lynch. So here we go. So Duke Leto Atreides is tasked, who's played by Oscar Isaac, is tasked by his emperor to modernize Arrakis. This is a desert planet populated by its own people known as the Freemen and visually akin to Tatooine, in my opinion. It looks like Star Wars. And Freeman, get it? Freeman, I don't know if that was intentional, but it sure came across that way. Arrakis is the home to the most valuable resource in the galaxy, which is known as spice. It's spicy. And the Emperor is determined to seize control away from the unwieldy savages of House Harkonnen and reestablish a peaceful settlement, or so we think. Along for the ride is Leto's concubine, Jessica, who's played by Rebecca Ferguson, and their son, Paul, who's Timothée Chalamet. Paul has been training for years in both physical combat with Leto's right-hand Gurney, who's played by Josh Brolin, and his mother's underlying mysticism to one day take over for his father as the Duke. Now, he's also besieged by visions he asserts to be premonitions of a future to come, specifically revolving around a beautiful Freeman woman played by Zendaya. Also, almost immediately after landing, the infinitely hungry Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who's played by Stellan Skarsgård, and who I refer to as Baron Second Breakfast, because dude's always snacking, leads a revolt in an attempt to destroy Duke Leto's people and seize Arrakis for themselves, forcing Paul and Jessica to flee with Paul's trusted bodyguard Duncan, who's played by Jason Momoa, in tow. And there is a little bit of a double cross involved. Watch the movie, you figure out where it is. This is playing in theaters and also on HBO Max. And this version is literally in the title card, Dune Part 1. So you know immediately this is the first part of at least a 2-part story. So it's half of a story. So we do kind of end on a cliffhanger. I don't really think it's a spoiler alert. I think that's something you should probably know, honestly, just so you're prepared for that. So Troy, you did not read the book, correct?
Correct.
And I did not either. So right now someone is yelling at this, well, you guys shouldn't even be talking about Dune. Well, we're here to review movies. And it doesn't matter if we read the book or not. This is a movie. So I know you love science fiction. You love movies like this. Overall, what did you think of the world building that took place within Dune?
So I sat down and I found it interesting because, like I said, I didn't get to the chance to the theater, so I did watch on HBO Max. I think the reason why Lord of the Rings, because this was being compared to like, this is the next Lord of the Rings, this is the next Star Wars. I think the difference with Lord of the Rings is that if you had never read the book from Tolkien, Lord of the Rings did a really great job of setting up the world, right? Here's a little title card. Here's a little bit of over speak from Galadriel with some scenery. And you kind of get that first 10 minutes and you're kind of like, okay, I kind of get the idea of what's going on, right? There's elves, there's dwarves, there's orcs, there's bad guys, there's magic, there's power. And I understand what all of this stuff is. And here's the hobbits. This one starts out in a way where you're just like, okay, thank God I watched this at home because subtitles on, because there are terms and words and vocabulary that I have no idea what the hell they're saying. And it probably took me 30 minutes into the movie, but I kind of finally figured out, okay, Arrakis is a planet, Atreides is the house, and there's like two other species, the Harkonnen, and I forget what the other people were in the white suits, the Saragon or Scarabrog or whatever it was. I don't even remember. And I don't even know how they even got into the mix of the whole thing, to be quite honest, because it was just like, there's just so much going on that you don't understand anything other than there's a desert planet that has some resources and everybody wants it. And I'm like, okay, great. So basically we're going to have people fighting over potatoes.
That's kind of funny. Essentially, a little bit. Because this spice is used for all kinds of things. All kinds of things.
Which I think that part they did really good job. They talked about the spice production and how spices, if you didn't have spice, you wouldn't even have interstellar travel. And because of that, the empire would fall. And you hear a lot about the emperor, the emperor, the emperor, the emperor. And I'm like, well, then show me the emperor. Like, show me like how vast and important this emperor is. Or is this emperor just some deity computer that's barking out orders that you don't even realize is just a computer because no one's ever seen this emperor? They just believe in something, right? There's like those gaps that are just, I think, a little bit frustrating when you understand like what is the motivation of these people other than correct some orange pixie dust.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they did not do as well of a job establishing the world as I would have liked. I think, you get it. I can get it. I mean, I understand what's going on. I was never really in doubt of what was happening. But in the same token, I'm a big fan of great films explain their world within the context of their film. I've had so many people when I say, look, I don't think they did a very good job of explaining the world for casual viewers. And people say, well, I mean, you obviously didn't read the book. I get that. You shouldn't have to. Period. Period. I know many people who never read Lord of the Rings, and they completely understand what the hell was going on. Now, granted, most of it is just, we're going to a mountain and drop a ring in. Okay, I get it. On the same token, it's a huge world. There's a lot of active involved parties, and you have a responsibility to make sure that everybody watching your movie understands it, not just people reading your book. Sorry. It's important. It's something that should be done. Now, I think it's there, and if you watch it more than once, if you can get through it more than once, then you'll probably have a clearer understanding if you didn't the first time. I mean, I got it. I don't really think it's that complicated. I really don't think it. Houses want the spice. The spice is the key. That's ultimately what it is. And Paul, I don't know if he fancies himself a savior, but he's definitely on a savior arc at this point. Now, whether that changes in the second half, I don't know. Maybe it will. Maybe that's all, just a little bit of side hustle. Maybe it's just like throwing us off. It's just trying to take our eye off the ball, whatever it is. I don't know that story until the end because I didn't read the book and I don't want to. This movie does nothing to make me want to read the book. I can tell you that. So I think the world building is fine. In terms of the performances, this has one of the best casts of any movie this year, I would argue. I mean, Oscar Isaac, Rebecca Ferguson. I like Timothée Chalamet. I think he's a very charming, capable actor. But for whatever reason, even though everybody else is great, Jason Momoa comes in and just like rocks the house as usual. I mean, the guy's just got charm for days, just walking into a scene. But on the same token, Chalamet, I found boring. I just had a hard time getting invested in his character at all. To me, he spent most of the movie staring off into the ether, having his dream sequences, pondering the future. And that does not, for a engaging character make, in my opinion. What was your take on Paul? Do you feel differently than I do?
I thought Paul was interesting enough because I was interested in the dream sequences and how he was experiencing them and what he was experiencing. I liked his interaction with his mother, Jessica, and just the understanding of this power that they wield, this ability to speak yet control minds. So it's like a telepathy, but it's not. It's a outward telepathy in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a really interesting concept, and I thought him progressing and trying to learn how to use that skill, he did fairly well. I mean, I don't know if it's just, he was kind of visually flat, but so was Rebecca Ferguson. So was Zendaya, quite honestly. Other than the blue contacts they put in her eyes. I mean, you could just stare at that all day.
I don't agree with Rebecca Ferguson. I thought she was great. She was going all over the place. Like she had things to do with her performance. I mean, she
did, but I mean, there's just so much. The movie, for the most part, is just people standing around or sitting around or looking out at tidal waves in the desert or watching the wind blow. I mean, there's just a lot of standing around where you don't get any action until that last 30 minutes. And it's that last 30 minutes where you start to go, okay, now Jessica's, coming into her own and we can really see what she's about. Right. And we can actually see a little bit of Paul's character and what he's really about, because otherwise he's just the Duke's son. Stay here, stay safe. Don't go. Don't do this. Don't do that. Right. It's only until they get out into the dunes where you start to really see what those characters become.
Yeah. And we start to kind of get a feel for where the story is headed, not the movie, because the movie, like I said, ends on a cliffhanger. So that'll be in the next film, which they have alluded to they are going to do. I certainly hope so. I feel bad for people that really love this movie if they don't get the part two. Now, I got done with the movie and I literally said they should have filmed both of these back to back, because this feels like M. Night Shyamalan's version of Last Airbender, where like you could do the second or third movie, but because it was so horrifically received that they didn't make the second and third movies. I mean, that's kind of how the general, like we were just talking about earlier, right? You want to take a name brand, you want to put something in the movie theater that's going to be sticky. And there's a lot of people in the sci-fi community and geek community that like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I can't believe it. At the same time, the general masses are going like, what the hell did I just watch? And why was it 2 hours and 40 minutes? They don't want to hear that conversation. A lot of times I'll go on Rotten Tomatoes, and just check like the audience score versus the critic score, because usually you get a better feel for where things are with the audience score. The audience score was already like jacked up before this thing even came out. I'm like, you haven't even seen the movie yet. How are you giving it 10s? I don't understand that logic, but that's obviously fans of the property. They want their sequel, and I get it. Everybody's a fan of something. If you want it, you want it. My thing with this movie is I think Denis Villeneuve is a fantastic director. I think visually, this is the most stunning movie of the year. Visually, for sure. It's an amazing accomplishment. I think the world is beautiful. I think all of the visual aesthetics here just are impressive as hell. I'm nothing but impressed visually. The problem is I'm bored shitless. It's hard for me to call this a good movie when I'm bored the entire time. There are huge action scenes that are supposed to be filled with operatic grandness, right? You're supposed to be just like in awe of the battle scene that happens. And I was bored. And I can't remember the last time I've seen an action scene as big as this and been as bored as I was. That's not a great thing.
The Last Jedi chase scene?
Maybe. Yeah, that took a long time. They went nowhere. Why couldn't you catch them? I don't understand. But anyway, I liked The Last Jedi. This is a movie where I like the story. I like most of the performances. I actually don't fault Chalamet for the performance. I think that's a writing issue because I've seen him in too many things where the guy is just perfectly charming. So maybe the next film he'll get to do more and I'll be more engaged with that character. But I can't remember the last time where all the pieces fit so well, but the film bored me to tears. I can't remember the last time that happened. Like I was just bored. And everyone I went and saw it with said the exact same thing. They were bored. Like it was movies have a job first and foremost to entertain. You can make all the visual spectacle you want. You can be as close to the book as you want. You can make everyone who's a fan of the book feel just warm and snuggly, but you have to entertain everyone, or at least make the attempt. And I did not feel like this was entertaining in any way, shape, or form. And I don't mean entertainment has to be zippy and fun and I don't mean that. It just has to flow and feel like I'm engaged. That's what entertainment means. It doesn't mean anything other than that. Few Good Men is not zippy and quippy and fun, but I think it's entertaining through and through. This was not entertaining to me.
Yeah, you have to harness your desert power and ride the flow.
Ride the worm, baby. Ride the worm.
And it's just like, I should say this too. The audio and the sound and the effects, it's the only reason I might actually go because I have the A-list and I can just, drop one of my things and it doesn't bother me. Mm-hmm. Like I would go see this in the theater now just to experience the audio of this movie because it was just mesmerizing. The didgeridoos and the deep throating. There's just a lot of like real interesting effects and acoustics that happen through the course of the film that just draw you in. At the same time, it's like, do I need to stare at the door knowing that there's a guy behind the door for 5 minutes?
Yeah, and
I know there's a guy behind the door. Open the damn door and let's get to the action part. This is supposed to be an action movie.
And how much slow motion do you need? You have a famous saying where you always say, most movies could be cut by 20 minutes. This thing could be cut by 40.
40.
Easy. I'm actually watching it going, I would cut that. I could cut that. This would move so much faster if you cut that. I mean, even walking is done in slow motion at points in the movie. And I'm like, why are they walking in slow motion? I don't understand what the hell is happening here. Is this Michael Bay?
So they don't make up the worms.
I did find that kind of funny. The whole sachet to the desert so that you don't alert the worms. I'm like, I don't know how that works, but I kind of dig it. I mean, interesting.
Really, you only see it once. They talk about it for so many times in the movie. They only actually show it happening once.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. All right, so that's Dune. If $10 is the full price of admission, what would you give Dune?
I mean, it's a part 1 of a part 2, so I don't really know yet. This movie standalone by itself, the audio and the visuals are really, really great. So it would balance out the flow and the pace. So I'm going to say a 6.
Wow, you sound real convinced of that score, by the way. Real convinced. I'm going with 4.5. It is technically and visually the most arresting film of the year. It's the most well-cast film of the year, but it plods and meanders until it reaches its very overwrought conclusion. It is not an entertaining film. Now, if you're a reader of the book, maybe you'll be more engaged with it. I personally just was not.
Yeah, there's one sequence in particular that you can see where it's coming. You can see where it's coming. And it's almost like we use the frame, the writing was showing. And when it happened, it wasn't even like exciting. It was kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and this movie shouldn't be like that. I mean, by all accounts that I've talked to people who read the books, that it should be a sprawling sci-fi epic. I never felt that. I just felt like it's a very expensive bore. Just bore. It's somewhere they can use for it.
It's a very expensive way to say the United States and Russia and England and the Saudi Arabians are fighting in Iraq for oil.
Yeah, kind of essentially. And, there's Freemen. Get it? Because they're free. I'm just saying.
I believe it's actually the Fremen, but...
Yeah, but I'm going to keep calling it Freemen because it makes me laugh. Because I think that was the intent. It feels
I'm sure it's the intent. Because they are free, because they just roam the deserts on their own.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. And so I'm sure all the people that saw the movie and book readers have been yelling at me for the last 10 minutes. I don't care. It makes me laugh, and that's what I care about. Also, we saw The Last Duel. It's probably already out of theaters, so I'm not going to go too into it.
But sad.
Yeah, it is sad. Jodie Comer stars as the wife of Matt Damon's character. This obviously takes place a few hundred years ago, and it's French. And Adam Driver is basically an opposing ruler, and she claims that Adam Driver raped her, and so Matt Damon challenges him to fight to the death. And the winner is basically that's who is perceived to have told the truth. It's an interesting concept. It's based on a true story, and all of the woman's parts are actually written by a woman, so they kept that perspective very natural to a woman, which I thought was interesting. And I thought this was a great film. I realize it's probably not going to be in theaters very long because it did really bomb. So it'll be on video at some point, in digital at some point, and I definitely recommend watching it. I would easily give this an 8.5 out of 10. I thought it was a riveting film. I was never bored. Tells the film from 3 different perspectives: Matt Damon's, Adam Driver's, and Jodie Comer's. You felt the same, or how did you feel?
Yeah, no, I think that it was initially one of those ones that also had suffered from maybe a little bit of a rough start out of the gate in the setup and who everybody was and what you were actually witnessing. It opens up really fantastic with the duel, and then as they're about to collide, that's when it goes back in time and starts to tell you the story. I think that the structure of the film was fantastic because they always say there's always 3 sides to every story, right? His, hers, or his, and the truth in this case,
right,
and hers is obviously the truth, and it's fascinating to see what they were able to do with the film in the concept of perspective. So as you watch each version of the story take place, watch for the small things. Watch who's wearing what, who said what, who pointed at what, who looked at what, because that, I think, is the fascinating part of the film that people are missing. And the sequence at the end, when you see the actual duel happen, like, you literally have no idea who's going to win up until the very last moment.
Yeah, I didn't. Then, you think you do, but you don't. Yeah,
you don't. And then even when it ends and you realize who ends up winning, the real question that you leave the theater going with is, like, did anybody actually win?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important story, especially when you're talking about a woman who was raped. And do you speak out? Do you not speak out? Pros, cons, consequences, all that stuff. Like, this is a film that everyone should see because it really makes you understand, like, who is the hero of your story. And if it's your story, do you get to tell it the way you want to tell it? And I think that is one reason why The Last Duel was fantastic. Screw the haters that hate it, because yes, sure, it wasn't in French accents, and sure, it probably had some over-the-top characters, and yes, it probably didn't feel like the 1300s, but at the same time, it was the best damn true crime podcast of the 1300s.
Oh man,
because I was riveted the entire time.
They make a conscious choice throughout the movie that the actors actually are present in their normal accents. But in terms of the movie, like, Adam Driver sounds like Adam Driver, Matt Damon sounds like Matt Damon. Ben Affleck kind of does a little bit of an accent, but whatever. So it's never
That's
French.
He's drunk
though.
all the time.
Yeah. But he's never French. Like, nobody's French in this movie. And I find that I like that. I really like that, because I don't want to have to deal with a bunch of people trying to sound French and then a bunch of people saying, well, they Costnered the shit out of that one. They just went in and out of accents. Just tell me the story. That's what I care about. I realize they're not actually French people, so it's fine. And some people will probably hate that choice. I loved it because I could just watch the movie and enjoy it. Enjoy is probably the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
I was entertained by it.
I was engaged. Yeah. And I think that's the reason why they probably chose to do it that way, because it's not about, the actors are fantastic. Don't get me wrong, right? Jodie Comer is phenomenal in this. I mean, she still can do no wrong, in my opinion.
In everything.
But it's the story itself that is the character that you need to pay attention to, not the actors and the language and the dynamics and the backgrounds it's like the story is the thing, and how you perceive the story and how you tell the story and how you remember the story is really what you're supposed to take away from The Last Duel.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. Absolutely. So be sure to check that out. It will be on digital, I'm sure, very soon. And I want to mention Snake Eyes. We've talked about this before, but I'm going to talk about it again. The action-packed adventure Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins is now out on Blu-ray and 4K Ultra HD, and has been hailed as the best G.I. Joe movie yet. The iconic hero Snake Eyes rises to become the ultimate warrior in the battle against Cobra. Buy on Blu-ray and 4K Ultra HD today and get thrilling special features, which include a bonus short film, deleted scenes, and a whole lot more. Also available on 4K Ultra HD Steelbook if you want to get a collector's version. Available at participating retailers, rated PG-13 from Paramount Pictures. And if you want to own your own Blu-ray combo pack, we are giving them away to 5 lucky listeners, but you must be based in the U.S., and we're having them shipped directly to you. So just email us at contests@thehollywoodoutsiders.com. That's contests@thehollywoodoutsiders.com. With the subject line, it's all in the eyes, and with your name, and we'll draw 5 lucky winners who will be notified they've won, as we'll need your addresses for shipping. So Snake Eyes, a G.I. Joe Origins film is out now. Also, our show's independently funded. If you want to help support the show, go to patreon.com/thehollywoodoutsider. We're about wrapped up here, but we do want to talk about movies that end on a cliffhanger. Troy, we talked about this. Dune ends pretty distinctively on a cliffhanger, and people don't know if they're going to get that second movie yet. A lot of other films have done this, though it's pretty rare that the first film in a series has. So I just want to talk to you. I mean, do you like this aspect? Do you think it's good to do this on a first film that you don't know if you're going to get a second one?
I think that, like I mentioned The Last Airbender and my Shyamalan's version, and the fact that it was supposed to be 3 books. Everybody that knew the source material from Nickelodeon knew that it was 3 books in 3 parts. And if you're going to go into doing something like that, you have to do like Lord of the Rings did, where you film everything all at once. And if you film everything all at once, at least then you have something to put out. Even if it wasn't great, it's still content that you can release in different formats, whether it's straight to DVD or straight to DVD. Look at me with my age. Straight to streaming or on demand or some other feature. At the same time, it's like, yeah, Dune, I can't, with how magical and beautiful and expensive as it all looked, I can't imagine why they wouldn't have done it if they knew it was going to be 2 parts and record them both at the same time. But at the same time, Back to the Future, when it first came out and it ended on that cliffhanger, and you were just kind of like, holy crap. It's like, is this going to happen? Like, are we going to get a second movie? Is there going to be a second movie? It was a cool way to end on a cliffhanger, hoping for a second movie, yet not knowing if you were going to get one. And if you didn't get one, it still works.
Exactly.
So I think the idea is that you have to be able to end it with the hope of the future, but still be a finale. That if it never comes back, you can say, oh, I can make up my own fan fiction stories and comic books and whatever, because obviously I'm not going to get a second version of this.
Yeah, if we never got Back to the Future 2 and 3, which maybe we'd be better off without them, honestly, we would still have that imagination and going at play, because we still got a completed film. Like the story we were watching was completed, and now we've got a bunch of adventures. We got fan fiction, like you said, in our heads about where Doc and Marty go. And some films have done that. I mean, Batman Begins, when they rebooted that one, sure, you're going to get more Batman films. But if that one flopped, even though it kind of ends with him being teased with the Joker card and whatnot, I can still picture that movie happening in my head. I can still picture The Thing. The Thing is a favorite one of mine because it ends very much with the characters and their fates and a cliffhanger. We don't know exactly how it's going to end, so we have to put that up in our head as to how this is actually going to finish. And I like that. It works for that particular movie, so it can work. I don't know why you do it when you got half the story, and why more studios don't do the Lord of the Rings approach, because it worked so well. I mean, I get it's a 1 in a million shot, right? You're not going to score that well every time. But in the same token, doesn't that make it a little easier at some point? I mean, you've got TV shows that are filming, multiple hours, and they're doing it all at once, Game of Thrones, things like that, like these big sci-fi epics, Vikings and stuff like that. Why couldn't you do that with, Dune or something like that? Just do it all at once. And if it doesn't work, maybe you release it as a series. I don't know, but at least you have it all done, so fans don't feel like they're wasting their time and engagement.
Yeah, and we talk about this a lot when you talk about software deployments and system deployments, because some people are like, well, the company can only handle so much and change management and blah, 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 blah. And you roll this stuff out, and it's like, well, I can either roll it out all at once and do it in 13 months, or I could roll it out over 3 years. And if you roll it out over 3 years, you spend more money because you have to keep more people employed. You have to keep more people, more money coming in, because it's just time, right? If you can record it all at once, you save so much money that even if the first one flops, you can still make money on the second one. Like you said, release it as a TV series and just break it up into 10 little mini movies and rework some of the editing. And it would probably work just great. And it might actually do better at the end of the day. But to know that there isn't even a script written for part 2 at this point for Dune makes me super nervous.
Well, thankfully I didn't enjoy it as much as you did, so I'm not that worried about it. If I never see it, I'll be fine. But I know a lot of people that absolutely love this movie, and I don't want anyone to not love something. So if they had a great time, that's fantastic. I am happy for them, and I want them to get the conclusion that they deserve.
And I don't think it's not that I I don't know if I enjoyed it yet. I watched it once. I watched it on a small screen. The sound was still impressive because I have a pretty decent sound system in my office. I think for me, it's something that has to be watched twice, because the first time you're just like, okay, who is everybody? What is going on? What is all the things I need to understand, especially not reading the book? Like if I go back and watch it a second time, then I'm like, okay, as long as HBO Max has 2x speed.
Oh, wow.
Because it's just, there's that much drag. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a sand joke or something, but there's so much drag in this movie that it's the space that really hampers it.
It's very coarse. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. There's just, because I think the story and the concepts and there's a giant empire and there's these warring houses and they want to collect this stuff. And there's these people that are like at the center of this war and like they keep ravaging their planet. I think there's a lot of good stuff in all of that story. It's just slow.
But back to our conversation on cliffhangers.
Yeah.
back to that. I mean, there has been a lot of movies where they've made good use of it. I mean, Captain America, I think, ended on a huge cliffhanger. But if you never got another Captain America movie, I feel like that still would have worked for me. I still got a full story, his full story. So that worked. But you've got a lot of movies that keep trying stuff like that. Green Lantern's probably one of the worst examples I can think of, because you have this ending where you get Sinestro, who's kind of built up, like he's Hal Jordan's mentor, and now he's going to use the yellow ring to harness the evil power. So it sets him up as like this big future villain. It's kind of like if you set up Thanos and then you never got to pay it off because the sequel never came, because the movie was poorly received. So basically anybody that might have enjoyed the movie now has a future that they never get. And I feel like that was still part of the story that was going on. So people are kind of screwed, in that respect. I don't like when they do that. I feel like cliffhangers should be held for a second movie. I don't think they should be part of the first one unless you've already filmed the future parts. Yeah.
Like Star Wars, A New Hope, perfect standalone movie. Never needed Empire Strikes Back.
Exactly.
But then Empire Strikes Back ends on the cliffhanger because you get the third, right? The Matrix, hey, we got this world and we can still do stuff with this world, but the first movie ends and it could be a standalone movie and it'd be just fine. Even Infinity War could have ended with the snap, and we could have had an entire 10 years post snap before Endgame ever happened.
Sure.
And that would have been, and then when Endgame would have happened, you would have been like, holy crap, it's a sequel. It's great. It's awesome.
Well, it would have been 5 years. Would have been weird if it was 10, but that's a different movie.
Yeah, I get it at 5 years. That's funny.
Yeah.
But I say 10 years because it took him 10 years to get to Infinity War.
Yep.
But at the same time, there's just, if you're going to go into it going, I know that this is a part one, then at least end part one with an answer or a hope of what's coming next, not just abrupt.
And don't just do it to try to be clever. I mean, do you remember the Planet of the Apes, the Mark Wahlberg one? The one that...
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that where they ended on that cliffhanger where General Thade is like, he's the Lincoln Memorial now? And it's like, what? And ape cops are everywhere because they were obviously setting it up for future movies and it just didn't work. What? That was so bad. Just so bad.
Yeah, because even the whole War, Rise, Dawn, I always forget which order they go in.
Rise,
Dawn, War, right?
Rise, Dawn, War, yeah. Rise, Dawn,
yeah.
War. Yep.
Like even there where they go across the Golden Gate Bridge and you're like, okay, like this was great. Like
story told.
I don't need another movie.
Yep.
But then when they come back and they're like, oh, here's the second movie, you're like, oh, this is really great. Like I'm excited to see a second movie, but they could be standalone at the same time.
Exactly. Just crazy. I mean, even Fellowship of the Ring, I realize Lord of the Rings is a 3-part story, but I actually, even though I wouldn't watch it just alone, I have watched just the first one. And I feel like even that kind of tells me the majority of the story. Like I got a feeling I could, in my mind, decide how it ends. I still think that's one of the ballsiest plays Hollywood's ever made, is by making all 3 of those at once. They got lucky that they were so well received, because that could have been a gigantic floppo.
Mm-hmm.
And we never, maybe we never would have got the second and third ones, because the first one has to be a hit for them to keep investing in special effects and the cutting and the post-production and all that stuff. So, I mean, we did get lucky, but they did film it all at once, which meant at least we knew those 3 parts were there. So it's just a matter of time and money.
Agree.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Now, I do want to mention some listener comments on this particular topic, because I just thought, like, some people had some thoughts, in terms of how they feel about ending movies on a cliffhanger. Christopher Jarmark says, it depends. Typically, I enjoy the suspense, and then it usually means that we're getting another film. However, there's been more than a few times where the moans of purists prevented the sequel from happening, like Power Rangers, Mrs. Peregrine's, The Suicide Squad, etc. I can see where fans are coming from. They're so deeply invested in source material that it has become part of them. So they only want to see what they expect. However, that's not the purpose of adaptation, an art form in and of itself. Adaptations aren't meant to be literal retellings. I kind of wish we could all grasp that without feeling slighted when films look or feel different from what we were expecting. I love that point. I really do.
That's good.
Yeah, it's a great point. Stefan Smitterbeck, he said, depends on the movie. Alita Battle Angel was bad because there will not be another movie. And then we have Marvel that more or less do cliffhangers the whole time and spice it with teases of things to come. It works for the moment they get released, but it is less interesting when years go by. I agree with that. Like that, if you go back and rewatch those movies and you watch them as standalones, it's kind of weird when you get those kind of post-credit scenes or the little cliffhangers for what's to come,
See, I think I disagree on Alita Battle Angel because
really?
At the time when I saw it, I was like, damn, like this is great. This is just getting good. I want more. At the same time, I think it ends at a really perfect place because she's saying like, you can't stop me. I'm coming for you. And the whole movie stands alone by itself just fine. So I don't agree on that one. I do want more for sure, but I think the movie itself is fine as it is.
I think it worked, but it surprised me that it was as good as it was, honestly. And by the end, I kind of did want additional ones. So I can see why people would want those. I just could see why people would want those. Last one, Anna Maria Germa. I think it depends on how the ending serves the story. A movie like The Truman Show was kind of a cliffhanger ending, but it works because the film is all about an old life ending and a new one beginning. If the cliffhanger is a result of a second movie that just never gets made, that's just a bad dice roll, I guess.
That's a good point. Was Truman Show a cliffhanger? Because how does Truman interact with the real world now that he's escaped?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I don't want that movie. That seems boring.
But do you consider that a cliffhanger? I mean, by that definition, Inception would be a cliffhanger ending. Because does the top spin and fall, or does it just spin? That's left to you. So is that a cliffhanger? Or is that just a proper ending?
The way the movie was supposed to end.
Yeah. So, to me, a cliffhanger is we don't get the answers to the overall story at the end. And I feel like Truman Show, you get the answers. I feel like Inception, you get the answers. It's just what you make of that final moment. Dune, it's all set up. That 2.5 hours is all set up.
Yeah, it's a 2.5 hour prologue to the actual movie that's coming.
Yeah.
If it comes.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully it'll come a little faster. You know what I mean? In terms of how it plays. My God. All right, that's going to do it for our show. Remember, you can share your thoughts on this episode or anything else in our Facebook group or on Twitter @BuyPopcorn. Again, we put this episode together because we weren't going to do one this week, but we wanted to do something because we had to talk about Dune, cliffhangers, but that's going to do it. You can find Troy Heinrichs @Troy Heinrichs on Twitter and The Blacklist Exposed, which is back, and it's got an interesting start to it. So we've already got episodes of that out, so be sure to find that in your podcast app, as well as Presenting Hitchcock, where I'm talking about Rear Window, finally, which that's my favorite movie of all time. I can't wait. So thanks for joining me, Troy, for this. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'll see you on the other side of the dune.
Okay. Well, remember, the next time you head to a theater and possibly nap, buy popcorn, eat it, and then sleep.